and then our justification.
Alright, I think in a real round you would not be allowed to fuss that much before you got up. I think you should
Really?
get up. I
Because
don't
in
know.
Parley normally you do.
Do you really?
Yeah, you normally give a
You
room
can
just
ask
because they
No,
have...
I don't mean that, but I mean the amount of time it took you to get up to start your speech.
Oh,
I think
like
was,
right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I thought...
Borderline abusive.
Yeah, no, okay, yeah, alright.
That's all. I don't care, but I'm just saying, I think in a real round you have to...
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay, that makes sense. Alright. We see political unrest as a bit of a scary thing. Nobody really wants it to happen because it opens the door to all sorts of potential abuses. As the opposition team pointed out, you could have a new Hitler, you could have a worse regime than you did before, you could have the people being oppressed, you could have temporary instability. But the question is, if we never change, then we never give any of these people the chance to improve their country because they will forever be locked in an oppressive regime. And then this, we're not saying that all political unrest is good, but specifically when we look at the Middle East right now, specifically Libya, Lebanon, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, we see that the political unrest that is happening across the board there is a step in the right direction. I'm going to be starting off by addressing the topicality contention. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not exactly sure how this is topicality. It wasn't exactly impacted to how we needed to lose the round. First off, my several response here though. First off, when she said that this means about time means it should have happened in the past, I agree. It's basically saying this is overdue. It's good it's happening now. It could have even happened before. My response is there's really no impact as to how that means our stance is a bad thing. It's good it's happening now. Maybe if it happened a few years ago that would have been good, although with maybe the change in administration in the U.S., this might make it more of an opportune time. My second response though, she said that she presented a standard saying it needs to achieve a long-term difference in order to be a good sort of unrest. My response here is we absolutely agree. Let's look at some long-term differences that are happening. Let's look at Egypt. Mubarak has been in power for 30 years. Egypt has a tremendous population of young people. Just the vast majority of people in Egypt have never seen a leader other than Mubarak. They want something different. Now is their chance to have a leader besides Mubarak. They have nothing to compare him to because he's all they've seen their entire life. We were talking about a long-term difference, the fact that they were able to surprisingly peacefully bring down their government and are now looking to replace it with something democratic. Let's look at Libya. Gaddafi ordered his military to fire on civilians, but some of the leaders refused to do that, saying we are actually in support of what the civilians are doing. We're not in support of what you are doing. Gaddafi's days are numbered. This is long-term change happening. People, for the first time, surprisingly successful, also surprisingly peaceful, not entirely peaceful, but largely so. These are long-term. This is tremendously effective and tremendously surprising that this is happening as smoothly as it is. We're seeing long-term changes happening. The standard is met. Let's move on to point 3. She said real political unrest equals violence. And here's where I start to kind of transition into their contentions. I flew it all under topicality, so I'm sorry for the little bit of disorganization there. But point 3 here, real political unrest equals violence. She talked about the French Revolution here. First of all, I would contend that when we're talking about political unrest, we're not talking about a specific government in the Middle East. We're not saying we approve of what's happening in Egypt. We're saying we approve of what's happening overall. Because if you look at the Middle East as a whole, there's political unrest. It's taking different forms. Some countries we just saw riots. Some countries we saw, for example, the King of Jordan fleeing to Saudi Arabia. In Lebanon, the entire cabinet, basically all the prime ministers resigned. Their government had to collapse. In Egypt, obviously, you see the president having to step down. So it's taking different forms, but it is, as a whole, a movement of political unrest. There's riots just about all widespread. They talked about the French Revolution. I counter also that the American Revolution meets their standard of real political unrest because there was violence involved. Basically, as long as somebody dies, the opposition's contention for real political unrest is met. I would contend that what's happening in the Middle East is definitely real political unrest. Over 100 people were killed in Egypt. It was believed that some soldiers, some police officers were killed by the mobs, and also that some police officers were firing on people in the mobs at some point, so there was a death toll there. Also, deaths have been happening in Libya recently with Gaddafi ordering his military. Yes.
During the Egyptian, right, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Was it overall peaceful?
It was surprisingly peaceful, yes, but people did die. Alright, let's move on to her point 4, that violence is bad. She talked about the Tea Party, how it would be bad if they had guns. The Tea Party is not taking over a repressive regime. You start off trying to achieve something peacefully, like riots in Egypt. They were largely peaceful. If that doesn't work, you might have to resort to something a little bit more violent, like we did in America. We first talked with letters, with petitions to Great Britain when they didn't hear us. Then we said we have to actually have a revolution here. That's not bad. She talked about how point 5 here is that violence can lead to an oppressive leadership. She talked about how Hitler was loved and about how non-violent political unrest will often lead to oppression. First of all, this doesn't apply because there is some violence in the Middle East. This hasn't been an entirely smooth transition, reasonably so. There have been people being killed. There has been some real conflict. Second of all, I would say that you win some, lose some. The fact is the people need to have a chance in what sort of a government they have. Right now they have a repressive regime. We're not going from good to bad here. We're going from bad to hopefully good, maybe bad, but the fact is the people are out there having a voice and they're doing something about it. So we specifically say it is about time for these people to have a voice. Let me move on to our justification. Justification 1. Her only response, she responded to subpoint C. She said that it doesn't always lead to democracy. I agree, it doesn't always lead to democracy. My point is, first of all, they don't have democracy right now. Second of all, they want it. Just look at Egypt. And third of all, it's time for the people to have a voice in what sort of government that they're going to elect. Let's look at Lebanon. Hezbollah is basically taking over the Lebanese government. Bad for American security? Possibly, but good for democracy because the people in Lebanon want Hezbollah's leader. The leader of Hezbollah is the most popular leader in the world right now, even more so than Putin, for example, in Russia. The people in Lebanon want him, and that's what they are getting. So it is democratic in that sense, yes. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to protect time. I'm going to move on, sorry.
Okay.
Let's move on to justification 2. They said that Saudi Arabia is not real political unrest. We're not talking about specific countries. We're not targeting and saying Saudi Arabia's political unrest just by itself is good. We're saying on a whole, what's happening in the Middle East is political unrest. The threat of political unrest, riots, governments collapsing, leaders fleeing to other countries, all of those combined definitely equal political unrest. Let's move on to justification 3. This was never addressed by the opposition. The fact is right now, America is trying to play, or in the past, we've been trying to play at both sides. We've promoted ourselves as the leader of democracy across the world, but then we've said, oh, you know what, the king of Lebanon or the president of Egypt, we're buddies with them, so we're going to not support democracy there, because if there were democratic elections, Hamas and Hezbollah would be elected. So it's time for the United States is being forced by this political unrest to choose which side we're really going to support. We believe we should support the people and help them transition smoothly. Thank you.